When Apple moves $100 billion in silence, the world listens. This isn't some corporate PR stunt or shiny ribbon cutting ceremony. This is Apple drawing a new line in the sand, a billion-dollar whisper signaling it no longer wants to play by China's rules. It's bold, it's calculated, and it might be the most expensive chess move in corporate history. The $100 billion gamble. Is Apple quietly declaring independence from China? Apple's $100 billion move may look like economic patriotism on the surface, but under the hood, it smells a lot like strategic separation. For decades, Apple has relied on China's manufacturing ecosystem like clockwork, building iPhones faster than the world could buy them. But rising tensions, trade barriers, and whispers of tech cold wars have changed the calculus. Apple isn't just shifting factories, it's rewiring its geopolitical DNA, quietly preparing for a future where China may no longer be a safe or sustainable partner. The beauty of this gamble lies in its subtlety. No angry headlines, no overt policy battles, just billions flowing into American soil with surgical precision. Apple is buying options, not just infrastructure. It's betting that the cost of reshoring now will be cheaper than the cost of being caught off guard later. With chip shortages, rare earth nationalism, and AI arms races ramping up, Apple seems determined to stop playing defense and start writing its own rules for survival. If this is indeed a breakaway, it's the most elegant one in corporate history. By reinvesting in the US, Apple isn't just hedging risk, it's making a play for autonomy. In an era where supply chains are national security assets and software is fused with sovereignty, Apple's $100 billion gamble might be the early blueprint for how global companies pick sides without ever saying it out loud. Silicon and sovereignty, how Apple's bet could reshape US tech dominance. Apple's latest investment isn't just a factory, it's a tectonic shift in tech sovereignty. By anchoring its next generation production in the US, Apple is doing what even governments struggle to do, bringing bleeding-edge manufacturing back on shore. This isn't about nostalgia for American industry, it's about building a sandbox where chips, sensors, and quantum components can be prototyped, assembled, and scaled, all under one flag. The timing couldn't be sharper, as nations race to own the future of AI, semiconductors, and advanced robotics. This could ignite a new era of vertical dominance. With design, testing, and manufacturing now within driving distance of each other, Apple could shrink development cycles from months to weeks, unlocking speeds no Asian factory grid can match. More control means fewer leaks, better quality, and innovation that stays close to home. And in a world where intellectual property is currency and cyber sabotage is a real threat, proximity is the new firewall. But the real headline might be what Apple's rivals do next. If Cupertino's bold reshoring works, it sets a new benchmark for the rest of Silicon Valley. Microsoft, Google, Nvidia, they'll all be forced to rethink where they build, not just what they build. Apple isn't just reshaping its own destiny, it may be pulling the entire US tech sector into a new era of industrial revival. Behind the factory gates, will Apple redefine the future of US labor? What happens when the world's most valuable company decides to build where it once outsourced? You don't just get jobs, you get a redefinition of labor itself. Apple doesn't do anything the old way. This isn't Henry Ford 2.0. It's more like Elon Musk meets Steve Jobs on an industrial scale. The new American factory will likely blend robotic assembly lines with AI-managed logistics, pushing boundaries on what made in the USA actually looks like in 2025. But behind the automation is a bigger story. Apple could create a blueprint for high-skill manufacturing jobs that don't just revive towns, but revolutionize them. Think mechatronics engineers, clean room technicians, and sensor specialists trained in modular hubs instead of giant warehouses. This is less about muscle and more about brain power. Cities hosting these Apple facilities might become the next innovation clusters, feeding directly into R&D pipelines and reshaping education systems to meet demand. Still, questions loom. Will Apple embrace full unionization? Will wages truly reflect Silicon Valley standards or settle somewhere in the middle? Will this reinvention of labor empower communities or just reinforce Apple's already towering control? One thing's for sure, as the machinery hums to life, the human element will be just as closely watched as the product lines themselves. shelves. A supply chain earthquake. How Apple's investment could trigger a global exodus. There's a seismic shift rippling through the global supply chain, and it starts with a bitten Apple. Apple's decision to pour $100 billion into US manufacturing doesn't just affect California. It sends shockwaves to Shenzhen, Taipei, and Hanoi. The old model, design in America, build in Asia, is being flipped on its head, and every contractor tied to Apple's trillion-dollar ecosystem is suddenly on alert. Foxconn, Pegatron, Wistron, they've built empires around Apple's overseas demand, but now that gravitational center is shifting. This isn't a slight pivot, it's a rupture. The dependencies that once locked Apple into Asia's logistical networks are now liabilities. Natural disasters, political risks, and cross-border tariffs have exposed the fragility of global just-in-time production. Apple is effectively unhooking itself from the old world of third-party assemblers and building an infrastructure it can fully command, from chip to chassis. That spells trouble for nations that built their GDPs around Apple's supply chain footprint. The global tech industry is watching with unease. If Apple succeeds, it cracks the illusion that offshoring is the only cost-effective path to scale. Others will follow, and a silent exodus from Asia could unfold piece by piece. What we're witnessing may be the most expensive but most strategic supply chain migration in modern history. The innovation loop. Could US-based manufacturing accelerate Apple's R&D breakthroughs? And when your R&D labs are down the street from your production floors, innovation accelerates like never before. Apple knows this. It's why bringing manufacturing home isn't just about control, it's about speed. In today's hyper-competitive tech landscape, being first is everything. The faster an idea can move from prototype to product, the more likely it is to dominate. By collapsing the geographic gap between engineers and fabricators, Apple could unlock a velocity advantage that leaves its global rivals gasping. This move reimagines the feedback loop. Engineers can test materials, iterate hardware, and refine chip designs in real time with the people who build them. It eliminates lag. A bug that might have taken weeks to identify and reroute through overseas facilities can now be solved overnight. In Apple's world, time isn't just money, it's market share, and this manufacturing reintegration puts the clock in their favor. More than that, it sets the stage for riskier bets. Foldables, wearables, embedded AI hardware. These bleeding-edge ideas require tight integration between design and execution. Apple's US manufacturing investment could mean shorter product cycles, more experimental releases, and a tighter lock on the innovation curve. The innovation loop isn't just about efficiency, it's a new weapon in Apple's already formidable arsenal. This isn't just manufacturing, it's maneuvering. Apple isn't turning its back on China with a bang, it's slipping out the back door with $100 billion in its pocket and a new map of the future in its hand. If you think this is about iPhones, you're not paying attention. This is about independence, and Apple just made its first move.